All right, let's call the meeting to order. Please salute the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everybody. Today's Thursday, June 22nd, and this is the Infrastructure Oversight Committee. Today's agenda, we start off with the approval of minutes. I'd just like to say the meeting is being recorded. If anybody wants to say anything to the microphone, please identify yourself for the record. Approval of the minutes, everybody had a chance to review them. Anybody want to move them? Need more time?
Mr. Chair, I've read the minutes and I move that we accept them.
Moved by Mr. Daly, do I have a second?
Second it.
Second by Jerry Catino. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Membership reminder, send requests to the Board of Selectmen for your next year appointment.
I've already done that.
Yep, okay. If anybody does, there he is, Mr. Emerald. We just started, so you're in luck, Mr. Emerald. All right. All right, upcoming meetings, kind of the consensus that we take July and August off unless something comes up that we have to come have one. We'll call everybody and get going for August. Do you want to wait for September or
We should probably,
take a look at the calendar?
Is that paid vacation?
Yeah, we'll get paid. The usual pay you'll get.
so I'm leaving on September 11th for a couple of weeks.
Don't tell everybody.
Huh?
Don't tell everybody. This is recorded. All right, well, if you want to pick a date, or wait, it's up to you. You do all the legwork.
I prefer, the first week of September, which would be the
Shoot a
weekend
date.
of Labor Day.
See if everybody's other committees don't coincide.
Of course, Jerry, you're not going to know whether you have a
I wouldn't know.
ZBA meeting
At this
or not.
point, we wouldn't know yet.
How about Thursday the 7th? Is Thursday our,
9
I
7.
know Jim doesn't like Thursday.
Thursday I can't make.
Huh?
Thursday I won't be able to make.
Sorry, say that again?
Thursday I
can't
won't be
make.
able to make.
Okay, so should we try for Wednesday the 6th?
What are we talking, September?
September 6th, yeah.
It's 2 days after Labor Day.
I'm sure.
You gonna try?
Yeah,
All right.
because, oh, wait a minute, what do I get here? September 6th? No.
You can't do the 6th?
No, fine.
Okay.
Okay.
See, we could then work around this one. If this was scheduled first,
Okay.
we'll work around it.
We'll put us down first. So, all right, so next meeting, right now is September 6th, unless we need to have one earlier. If we have any revelations, anything exciting comes up.
Now, is that gonna be 6:30 also?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think
Or 6.
Bob moved it from one meeting from 6 to 6:30.
I don't
Bob
mind.
Naylor?
That's fine with me. I just wanted.
Bob, what time works for you?
6:30 is fine.
6:30 is better? Okay, let's say 6:30. The sun will still be shining then, right, in September?
The sun will still be shining, yes.
Okay, we've got a presentation by the Board of Health yet. Do you have to call your meeting to order, Tanya?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead, please.
On behalf of the Board of Health, I call this meeting to order on June 22nd, 2023, and it is being recorded.
You want to come up?
Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
My name is Tanya Ryden. I'm the chair of the Westport Board of Health. I know most of you, but not everybody. Not everybody,
You want to go around the table?
that'd be helpful.
Roger Fernandes, Assistant Town Administrator and Project Management role on the Route 6 Sewer project.
Jerry Catino?
Bob Daly.
Steve Follett, Maureen May,
Manny Sauce.
Joe Emerald?
and Robles. You know Jim
Jim
Hart,
Hart.
right?
And I'm Phil Weinberg, the vice chair.
Very good.
So we have slides. I thought that would be helpful because we have the language of the reg. So I was asked to, we were asked to come and talk about the Westport Board of Health local septic regulation, particularly with regard to the cesspool phase-out. But there's other information that we will also go through, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion. And as I was talking with Jerry beforehand, we welcome the opportunity to come today and talk about it and hope that we have continuing dialogue, because I think it is important to coordinate.
Matt, can everybody hear back there, or we need to shut down the AC?
I think it's loud.
Yeah.
Can we go to a lower setting?
Well, should we open the windows?
All right.
I can try talking louder.
People take time out of their night. We want them to be able to hear. And the people at home.
So we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So our septic regulation, we first adopted a separate regulation in that was effective February 1, 2021. It's been modified and incorporated a lot of old local septic regulations so that was effective last fall. So this is the language that I'm using from the current regulation. The provisions around the cesspool upgrade are, they've been the same since 2021. There are 3 provisions. Deadline established in Title V, so that's the Title V rule about failed systems, and usually that's a 2-year timeline. The second is if there's a sewer or a shared or a cluster system available, cesspool homeowners would need to join that. We don't have much sewer, a little tiny bit, I think, at the top of Route 6. And at this point, we don't have any cluster or shared nitrogen-reducing systems. And then the third was a 5-year deadline that is February 1, 2026. When we first adopted this regulation a couple years ago, sewer was not as far progressed as it is now. So it's certainly the environment's a little bit different. And then the second part of the provision is just, again, pursuant to Title V. We can designate a shorter time frame if there's an emergency health hazard. Next slide. I also wanted to point out this provision that's in our regulation that applies to all sections of the regulation, but also for the cesspool upgrade portion, which allows us to, following a hearing, grant a variance of any provision of the regulation under either of those criteria. And the language in blue is also part of the regulation, so it spells out the kinds of criteria we'd look at. Again, we didn't, the imminent availability of sewer would be a provision that, a consideration that we would look at. So this is an already existing provision, an option for us to consider. But basically, it allows either an alternative that results in greater or equal or greater environmental protection, including but not limited nitrogen reduction, or if sewer is further off, or there are other provisions, other circumstances, strict enforcement would be. There's legal language called manifest injustice. We reference that, and the factors we would look at. Proximity of the system to drinking water and surface waters, physical condition of the site, and cost of full compliance. So those are all variables that we would look at, not limited to those, but those are we called those out. So why did we prioritize cesspools when we were first starting down this path? Essentially, a cesspool is an outhouse with indoor plumbing. It's a pit lined with cement or stone that does not filter or treat wastewater. They've been banned in all 50 states, and in Massachusetts have not been allowed or installed in Westport for certainly over 45 years. So any existing cesspools in town are really old systems. Since cesspools don't treat wastewater, they have a disproportionate impact on the nitrogen load, on groundwater, and to the watershed. And as we know, the Westport River has a TMDL, and we are working on strategies. There are multiple strategies, sewer being a really important one for helping us achieve the TMDL. Cesspools of all the systems in town are the least effective, least performing, and so the ones we prioritized for upgrading. And I didn't mention it before, the upgrade requirement is not to a nitrogen reducing system, it's just to meet Title V. So that's the framework for that. And we see drinking water wells contamination is often associated with close proximate cesspools. So next slide. This is, I'm sure, one you're familiar with. This map is from the Targeted Integrated Water Management Plan, showing contaminated wells that have been identified, particularly in the, well, this was based on the report, their phase 1 and phase 1A and 1B, which I think, from what I saw in shorelines, is modified at this point, but it gives you a sense of along Route 6. And then the other areas in town with particular concentrations of contaminated wells include Westport Point and Lillette, which I suspect will never be sewered. So that's another factor. Next slide, please. So we sent out notice to over 200 homeowners throughout town based on it took us about 6 months to review our files, and where we could confirm that there was a cesspool. We think that there are probably many more, but we don't have any records because they're so old. So that's another problem or issue for us to wrestle with down the road. But our first priority was confirm cesspools. I just did a manual look at that list to identify how many cesspools are on the, what you call the spine, I believe, that immediately on Route 6 addresses, shall I say. In phase 1 or 1A, however you're calling it, up to Route 88, there's one known cesspool, possible for additional cesspools based on structures built prior to 1970. It also includes the, a car lot and that little mini go-kart racetrack. I don't even know if there's a restroom there at all. So those are ones we'd have to investigate further. In phase 1B, 1C, 1, 2, whatever it's called now, through the rest of State Road, we have 7 known cesspools, 3 of which have approved upgrade plans on file with our office. So that happened in the last couple of years. And then 37 possible cesspools, same kind of scenario, houses built before 1970, and we have no records, so no definitive information. Some of those may not have any cesspool or may have updated septic systems. We just don't have the records. So I would say that would be the maximum number of possible cesspools. So that's the universe for the Route 6 corridor. Moving on, I just wanted to highlight a couple of other quick things. This is from Title V, so that's state code that we can't be less strict unless there's a variance provision that would allow us to be. So just in summary, if sewer is available, so it's existing, no new or increased flow septic systems would be allowed if it's feasible to connect. There are some exceptions, and again, under a potential variance provision. This is, slightly less relevant, but no Title V inspection is required at the time of a sale or a transfer of property if the owner has an enforceable agreement to upgrade or connect to sewer within 2 years. So, if they are selling the property and sewer's there, they don't have to have a Title V inspection. If sewer is coming, it's, in the fairly short horizon, you'll see the language which I've summarized from Title V. If it's a failed system, normally has to be upgraded within 2 years, except for when the Board of Health allows an extension based on a commitment to connect to sewer within 5 years. So that's the Title V language, and requires regular pumping in the meantime. In order for us to allow that, the town has to have a fiscal commitment and facility plan for sewer in place, which I think you are working on very actively. So that's Title V language. Next slide. As probably all of you heard, yesterday Mass DEP announced that they were filing updated regulations today. We haven't had a chance to look at them in detail yet. They are to take effect July 7th. But then the commentary we got from DEP yesterday is the regulations, both the two regulations that they're amending or adopting, only address the watersheds on Cape Cod. So that means Westport is not under the gun for either the watershed permit or that 5-year upgrade timeline. And in that language, Mass DEP said they will continue to work with communities on the South Coast to plan for and address nutrient pollution to embayments and estuaries, and to consider appropriate steps to ensure timely action is taken to address water quality issues. And again, as the Board of Health has we put out a column and we've communicated with DEP, we think Westport has been very proactive, the sewer being a major component, our regulation, which targets old systems on primarily cesspools, and new construction, which I'll talk about in a second, are all part of our the targeted integrated water management plan that we've been actively working on. So I think Westport is very far advanced, and maybe by the time DEP gets down here, we'll be in such great shape we don't even have to worry about it. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that new regulation. I'm sure our expert here will analyze that really carefully, the new language, and see what implications there might be just under the standard Title V provisions. But for what was initially all those public hearings and the anxiety that created is off the table for now. And even if it ever incorporated Westport, there's a several-year process for designating a nitrogen-sensitive area, and then there's the 2-year timeline for the watershed permit before, so we are talking a long way down the road if it ever came to pass. And just, although this is not cesspool focused, I just wanted to review quickly our regulation on new construction, which is except where it's feasible to connect to sewer, all new construction shall install a nitrogen reducing system to meet the performance standards provided in another section of this regulation. So that provision has been in effect since February 1, 2021. It's slightly expanded. It was originally a slightly smaller area in town. Now it's town-wide. And that's been, we see pretty much all new construction coming in with DNITE systems. I should point out, DEP has only approved officially as nitrogen reducing systems those that are under general use approval that are not, I should say, maybe explain that when we have remedial situations, those approvals for alternative systems, including nitrogen reducing, there are no DEP approvals for remedial use for nitrogen reducing. So just for new construction generally. People can voluntarily use technology, and if they're able to meet the new construction standards, can use a general use approval to install denitrification, but that's a voluntary thing. We only require it for new construction. And the last slide, and just also what was incorporated in the regulation at the time is trying to look ahead for the eventuality of sewer, which wasn't as developed a couple years ago as it is now, was to establish a mechanism for people, so this would apply basically to new construction, that they would have an additional time to hook up to the sewer system based on the useful life of the existing nitrogen reducing system, which other communities, the standard that has been established that we copied was a 20-year timeline. So if the system's 11 years old, then they have an additional 9 years to connect to sewer. So that's a provision that has been in place since we adopted the regulation. So that's a quick overview. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if there's any commentary people want to have about how this interacts with the sewer timeline and the scope of your proposal. I've seen what you've said in Shoreline, so that's
Committee first, then we'll go to
been
Mike.
helpful.
Go ahead, Maury.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the Board of Health for their response to that DEP initiative in the form of the letter that you all sent, which I believe the Vice Chair may have authored if I know his writing style. And also your participation in that statewide committee, that advisory committee, that advanced the standpoint of the non-Cape communities, which clearly resulted successfully in the new reg, which I guess you said is coming out tomorrow officially, but the administration put out a press release yesterday, which cleared it. So I just want to thank you guys. Good job.
Thanks, Val.
Thank you. And as I said at the beginning, I hope this is the beginning of a dialogue. Obviously, we want to collaborate and coordinate around the implementation of sewer and how that impacts, because certainly if somebody has to upgrade a cesspool and sewer is coming in a year, then either we can use a variance provision or maybe some other mechanism to align
Right, makes sense.
those.
Nick?
So Tanya, what is the state's requirement for the upgrade of a cesspool?
Based on a Title V inspection, which usually happens at a transfer.
So again, it's only, what is their requirement? When a Title V happens,
But when it's determined to be in failure by the Title V criteria, it would need to be upgraded within a 2-year time frame.
so in other words, if somebody had a complaint and they had an imminent public health threat, would be in failure. But if they had a cesspool and the person's been in it since before the Title V upgrade in 1995, and they're still in this house today, what is the state's requirement? So you have a well, doesn't have any, they're not, when they sell the house, that's when they're required to do Title V, so that's when the cesspool will be in failure just because of the criteria that's a cesspool.
Right. There are occasions if there's not triggered by Title V, more frequent pumping is required because, or there's a complaint, odor. There's lots of reasons to trigger a review of a cesspool.
So like some of our seniors, because I got a lot of calls on your letters that you sent out. Some of our seniors that, they've been in their homes before the Title V regulation states on a transfer of a house is when they need to upgrade. They're required to upgrade the transfer of a house. And then our integrated water plan, which we paid Kleinfeld a lot of money to do it, said that we should target those cesspools that have been transferred since 1995. Now, this letter that you sent out kind of targeted all cesspools. So, we just had this article in the Shorelines, and my colleague said how we'd like to see more young people move to town. I would like to see more young people stay in town. I grew up in town, and I would like to see our seniors continue to finish their life in town. When they get this regulation, we don't tell, there's nothing in here about what they can do, about not moving forward to get engineering, and in 2 years you have to do this. These people are calling engineers that, in the climate that we have today and the economy that's going on, and they can't get a hold of an engineer, and then engineers are quoting them back $3,000-$4,000 to come out and start doing work at the site. I personally know many seniors that got this letter, and they're in distress right now. And I understand the grandfather under the Title V regulation. If it's not a public health threat, I don't know why we're talking right now.
Well, there are two reasons. One is like the public health threat around drinking water, and the second is the environmental threat, which is the whole TMDL and preserving the water quality of the Westport River and the tributaries. So there's two components to it. But we've heard that concern. We did try. We had some weekly public information sessions after this letter went out, for people to come on Zoom and we could answer any questions. We've heard concerns from the realtor community, and we've agreed to put together an information session, talk through a little bit more about, the mechanics of it, the options for delay. But importantly, I think, as the sewer project progresses, at least for the Route 6 cesspools, or the neighborhoods, depending on how you forecast the timeline there, we would continue the dialogue and figure out, something that would work if sewer is coming imminently, because then it absolutely doesn't make sense economically to do a cesspool.
I just wanted to say just one thing. What's that phrase? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. So I think the intention of the letter was to remind people, because we set a 5-year timeline, okay, and there's kind of like 3 years left to it. And it was not to be in a situation where at the end of 5 years, everybody was, quote, out of compliance. It was just to remind people, this is coming up. This is a time to plan, to think about what you might want to do about it. It wasn't to get people upset or, to scare people. It was just really inform people and to provide with a bunch of information about what you could do with financing. So that was really the objective. And I think it's kind of reflected in the regulations. We have a lot of flexibility built in to the regulations and the process to kind of address situations where people, for financial reasons, for example, or just because of life plans, need to be accommodated in some way. So that's what we were really trying to do to start the conversation going, rather than come at it where, we had a couple hundred cesspools and no one had done anything about it. Well, the other thing is that we also anticipated that, as we've seen the market, that as houses have turned over naturally, a lot of the cesspools have been upgraded just to standard Title V systems. And we were still counting on that, as well. So, because I would say a high majority of the upgrades that we have come before us now are replacement of cesspools. So, and that's been the case for the last several years. And so there's a lot of cesspools that have been knocked off the list.
The trigger on that, though, is when the house is transferred, the bank requires a Title V.
Yeah.
So it's many of them slip through the cracks.
Right. Well, that was, just to say one other thing, that was another, I don't want to say complaint, but an observation that people would make, which is that Title V creates a lot of exceptions to having your system inspected at the time of transfer. If you're in a trust and these other kinds of transfers. And so people were transferring their property without getting inspected. And again, our experience has been that it is the normal case or the typical case that the cesspool is in the water table. Because they didn't really dig them down, and there wasn't any requirement that there be a separation between the groundwater and cesspool. So it's right in the groundwater. It's and it's just if there's a well, it's just traveling in the groundwater, and so and So, yeah, exactly. So we were trying to move the ball forward, on this issue in some way. That was really, and the letter was just it was a reminder to give people information. And as we said, the collateral impact on some people is very unfortunate, and we're going to do everything we can to try to address that.
I mean, I appreciate the other letter from the Massachusetts Association of Board of Health that Matt had posted on your website. I mean, I think I'd really like you to look at this and try to come up with something as a response to this stuff that went out to try to fix what's happening.
Yeah.
In the meantime, though, some people have stepped up, like seniors have done the right thing. They know what was wrong, they know there was wells messed up, and they appreciate the heads up.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a total disaster for everybody. We have a septic betterment system that helps the seniors.
Steve, can I finish, please?
All right, wrap it up, because we've been going.
No, this is kind of an important issue that I've gotten many calls from the
So,
constituents.
go ahead.
I just don't want to get sidetracked here. So Tanya, do you know why these innovative systems were designed and created?
Are you talking about strictly nitrogen reducing or IA systems in general?
No, the innovative ones that we're using for this denitrification system.
Well, this particular language, innovative alternative systems, is a class of technology. We see a lot of IA systems in Westport for addressing specific issues, separation from groundwater, different soil types, and so on. And some of them are certified for nitrogen reduction, I was referring to earlier.
So basically, they were for systems that do not meet Title V. So you have drinking water problems, you have wells that are too close, you get existing houses. They were created so that they can come into compliance with the standards. Because before, for a Title V system, now you had to give them a variance, and it was a grandfathered right to have that bedroom in that house. So that's what they were created for. They weren't created for new construction. They weren't created for this other stuff. That's what they were created for. And I don't even, what I'm trying to do is we're moving forward with this trunk line. So they keep calling it Phase 1A, 1C. Phase 1 is the trunk all the way down Route 6. We have 3 contracts proposed. And I'm hoping that Roger comes out today and gives us some kind of timeline on where we are with those contracts. We probably don't have the money to put that in yet. However, once that trunk line gets put down Route 6, what it will spawn will be people that have a big need, which wasn't addressed in our shorelines. We've gotten letters of interest from all the other property owners. We also have a big concern with the Watuppa. I don't know, I think there's probably 25, 30 cesspools that you guys have identified on the Watuppa. The Watuppa watershed is the backup drinking water for the city of Fall River and Westport. And it is not a designated denitrification area. They've identified through a study from UMass what the problem is. And Fall River and Tiverton have plans in place and are moving forward with reclamation plans to try to correct it from historical pollution into the pond. Now we have, I seen one of them, you had 9 houses in a row with cesspools that need to be created. So we get this trunk line and in contract 1, it would be very easy for us to sewer all around that whole pond in another contract, that we could possibly partner with Fall River and get monies from drinking water and get that done versus, I'm not sure since your regulation has been adopted, how many millions of dollars that the residents have paid for these upgrades, and many of them aren't any effect on the river at all. I'm just trying to save some people some money because they're going to be, we're looking at how we're going to pay for the sewer, and if we're making people put these septics in right now, and I mean, you send this out, it would have been nice, like, all those, hey, we're trying to design a sewer so we get some support for the sewer versus trying to do this. That's all I'm trying to get at.
All right. Any other questions from the board before I move on? Sean Leach had a meeting down the hall. He was pacing, waiting, so that's why I was trying to get to him. He asked, can you, this is from Sean Leach. Can you ask what the determination of contaminated well is based on? That's Sean Leach's question.
I'm sorry,
What
say
are you
that again.
basing the determination of a contaminated well? Is it voluntary? You're not going around testing them. I would imagine he's just guessing how the,
Oh, the map that I showed, that was Kleinfelder going through our files. We, people who have test results that show high nitrates.
this is just voluntary testing.
So we have a regulation that requires well testing when someone upgrades their system, but the distance between their upgraded system and their well is less than 100 feet. So we require them to test their well and to test their abutter's well
Okay.
If
for
it's
3
less than 100.
years. And when we get the results of that testing, that is the basis for our knowledge of contaminated wells. People who test their own wells are not under an obligation to
They may
inform us.
voluntarily report to the Board of Health, and we put it in the file.
But
Yeah,
is,
they
are
do
they
that.
testing it, or are you sending it somebody? Are they voluntarily
No,
doing the
the-
test? Or you having an engineer or somebody go out of water testing?
Yeah.
All right.
There's, right, yeah.
Because that was the problem before. They were
Right.
doing their own testing. It wasn't
Right.
necessarily a well. Go ahead, man.
Mr. Chairman. So that was some of the information I was trying to request
Yeah.
through Matt the other day. So as I understand, all of those systems that have been installed have an agreement that's recorded in the registry of deeds, and we have a consultant, I guess, or what was it, Buzzards Bay, whoever's doing the monitoring. So I'm just,
For the river, but not for the wells.
Right.
well, I'm talking about these denitrification systems that we're putting in.
Oh, yeah.
We're not even
yeah,
sure
yeah.
if they're
Right.
working.
So
Right.
there's
Yeah.
two separate issues. You were talking about upgrades. All of those upgrades are under Title V. Our regulation does not address when people have to, Title V, whether it's a regular septic system or a cesspool, if it triggered by a Title V inspection. So we do not.
What I'm concerned with is the ones,
Could I
the
please
D-Night
finish?
systems that have been installed, because I've asked you this plenty of times already, the systems that have been installed that we're monitoring, where are they working? Are they doing what they're supposed to do?
There
We
have
have a
been-
5 parts per milliliter threshold in the groundwater, which is really only a problem if you're drinking the groundwater, but I'm just concerned on what's coming. And then you did also say that we don't have any cluster systems. Well, Nokochoke Village is a cluster denitrification system that was installed in town, and the planning board worked on it. How are the test results coming out of it? How is that working for us?
That-
It's right on the head of the river.
All right, let her answer. Okay.
So under our regulation, if you're talking about denitrification systems that were either installed voluntarily or at the requirement of the planning board, those may be in the Barnstable County reporting, but we don't have a way, we don't know, which ones are necessarily the criteria you're looking for. Under our regulation, we've approved, I don't know, dozens of, probably maybe even close to 100, for new construction. That's the only requirement under our regulation for denit. There's no other provision of our regulation that requires denitrification. Of those, and I gave you the list of all the permits that we had, so you can see all the new construction. There are not any new construction that have been installed and made it all the way through as-built plans and a sign-off in the Barnstable County system. So we don't have any data for the D-night systems under new construction under our regulation. If you're talking about denitrification systems that were either voluntarily installed or by the planning board or other alternative systems, those are in Barnstable County, but they're not called out as D-night systems individually.
So they're being monitored, though?
Depends. They have to follow the DEP approval letter requirements. They, in general, everything that goes to Barnstable County is there because they have an operation and maintenance agreement that does not necessarily, most of the time, does not involve testing. So there isn't necessarily total nitrogen data for those. So there's a lot of alternative systems. So the Barnstable County system, we adopted that because we don't have the manpower to monitor all of those O&M agreements and the service, which looks at pH and a bunch of other stuff, but not, for the most part, those don't have a total nitrogen testing requirement from the DEP approval letter. So there's no, there are some. If Nokochoke Village, I think the planning board established a nitrogen limit that had to meet, so they would have data. There are some, and the new middle high school, I think the planning board also established a requirement for a denitrification system there. That predates our regulation. So it's a.
But that reporting, Lisa, Nokochoke and they're reporting their water system and their wastewater system goes to the state. It doesn't come to the Board of Health, I don't think.
I think the operators generally may also submit it to Barnstable County. I don't know for sure.
I mean, one point of information, context in terms of whether the systems are performing up to. So I think pretty much all the systems that are adopted are under a general use approval by DEP. In order to get a general use approval, the manufacturer has to have installed 50 systems in the state and provided the data to DEP to show that their systems can meet the permit requirement that DEP sets. It's a DEP approval.
Yep.
So these systems have a track record of being able to achieve what they represent, the system can achieve, and DEP reviews all that data. It's kind of beyond our purview, but it isn't as if some fly-by-night person can come in and just put a system in. And the way the system and the permit then works is that the owner has to hire a wastewater treatment operator to do operation and maintenance on the system in order to see that it continues to perform as it was approved to. And that's kind of how the system is set up. And just to echo what Tanya said, I mean, there's no electronic reporting of data to the Board of Health. I mean, we just couldn't possibly deal with that kind of information. We have to rely on the way the system is structured, and maybe at some point going forward, that could be something that could be addressed. But we're really counting on DEP's oversight in approving the system and the operation and maintenance of certified wastewater operators, that the systems are working as, so to speak, advertised.
Well, one of the things one of the reasons I'm asking is I'm just curious, so in groundwater, one of these systems, how many parts per milliliter?
Say again, I'm sorry.
How many parts per milliliter nitrogen are in the groundwater coming out of the system? Because DEP says that 10 parts per milliliter are safe in drinking water. So we've had systems in town that you guys have approved. So when it came in, and it was it's definitely an area that needs an innovative system because the wells are too close and so forth. Your threshold is 5 parts per milliliter when you test the well, which that's already at a level that's acceptable to the state. Now you're taking the sewerage and saying, okay, so we don't meet the setback to the well, so now you have to do a denitrification system. So this was a Title V upgrade that now you're requiring them to do a denitrification system because it doesn't meet that standard. And in your regulation, you said, well, if you don't expand and it's not new construction, you can do a regular Title V upgrade.
Well, there's a very long, boring answer to that question, which is a legitimate question. I don't know if we want to take the time of the Infrastructure Oversight Committee to go into it.
No, but I just... okay.
But
So
all that we're doing is implementing DEP policies in that regard. And I'd be happy to show you the policies and sit down and talk you through it. It's not something that we just made up out of whole cloth. And I do recognize that there is a difference between the maximum contaminant level and the level of, which is 10, and the level of 5, which is a trigger for us to consider what the appropriate response should be. And it's not always a D-night system, but DEP policy says we're supposed to look in those situations where there are small lots, and if the well is down gradient from the septic system, meaning the groundwater from the septic system is flowing in the direction of the well, and some other factors that we look at under DEP policy.
Well, my concern on this specific one was, the water main was 500 feet away from this particular. And there's a couple of dried wells, a couple of other contaminated wells right in the same area. And this person, now, the engineer came in with a D-night system. And now some of these innovative systems, you're allowed to put the system closer to the groundwater.
Correct.
And then the Board of Health said, nope, you gotta follow the Title 5 foot. So now, this is right under Route 6, and you need to put a retaining wall around that. So he's up at a cost of like $60,000. The water main was ended 35 years ago, 500 feet away from the lot. And the well is maybe 10 feet off of Route 6. So those are the things that I'm just trying to...
Yeah, well, okay.
Do you have any questions, or we're gonna be good?
Just,
All right, go ahead, Jerry.
just in terms of your presentation, I wanted to just clarify two things.
Sure.
One is, in the context of this, what is new construction? New construction of a house, new construction of a brand new septic system? What is
We're
new
talking, new construction is new construction of a
Of a
house.
house, right?
Right.
So there are variations of that whereby, in other aspects of building, if you're putting new facilities that equal to more than half of the value of the house and so forth, you have to follow certain building code and so forth. Is that the same thing with you?
No, it's new construction or increase in flow. So if you add a bedroom, but if you're adding a porch or a garage,
Or a
that does not.
bathroom.
Okay, so it's
The
not,
bathroom.
it's
Bathrooms
not
don't count.
putting in a system
Bathrooms don't count?
where there's
Bathrooms
never,
don't count as
bathrooms don't count.
bedrooms.
it is not putting in a system that has never had a septic system on that site. It's not, that's irrelevant, is that correct? In other words,
Can you
well,
say
I'm
that
saying,
again?
Let's say I have property and it's vacant,
Uh-huh.
okay? I want to build a house, okay? Well, then that's
New construction,
There's
yes.
no question about that. But if I have a property and I'm only doing something to improve it with new construction, that's not new construction unless I'm adding a bedroom. That's what I'm
Correct.
trying to clarify.
Yep.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yep, it's based on increased flow that would impact the septic
Requirement,
system.
okay.
And if it's a 3-bedroom septic system, you're adding to the flow, that is, that would trigger the new
Because I've
construction.
never heard the phrase adding to the flow. I've only seen new construction, so.
Oh, yeah, I didn't include the definition, sorry.
No, but I'm just saying, I'm trying to clarify. Second thing is, in some of your responses to Manny, you mentioned a few times Barnstable County. What is the relevance of Barnstable County? I know nothing about that.
Sure. Barnstable County has an electronic data system that communities can join where they work with the operators of these O&M, operation and maintenance contractors, and collect the data, the reporting and so on our behalf. So a community joins, and then they take care of all of that monitoring and administrative burden. Otherwise, everybody would submit paper reports to us, and they'd go in the file, and probably there they'd sit, because we don't have the staff to really keep track.
The
So
operators are these companies that sell the systems?
In some cases, a lot of times it may be a subsidiary, but there are also independent operators. And Barnstable County has this list of all the certified operators that are available in this area. So pretty much most of the Cape, but there are other communities, I think as far away as Easton, that have joined, and other off-Cape towns.
My biggest concern and my reason for wanting to have you folks come here had to do with stuff that I think is partially covered in what I saw on the screen there.
Mhm.
And that is, if it's an imminent sewer system, we don't want to be forcing people to put a septic system in when a year from now, or 3 years from now, or 6 years from now, I don't know what the time frame would be. I saw 5 years over there, that you've got to go through this expense, and then you're going to have this thing go by, and then they're going to have you pay betterment fees and
Yeah, no,
and
that doesn't make
possibly
sense.
connect and so
Right.
forth. But it looks like it's addressed already to some degree in there.
Title
But
V has
variance.
some language.
But I do think that within your Board of Health, here locally, you need to be at least start thinking about what time frames. If it's 2 years out, are we gonna hold back a little bit? Or it might be how bad the current system is. that they
Yes.
have.
So,
I
yeah.
don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, there's probably not a blanket answer, but I would suggest it might be helpful if we come back in the fall when I know you have grants pending, when you have a
See what
better
progress.
idea of the timeline and exactly, which areas, and perhaps the planning board can map out where the known cesspools are in terms of the districts that you're establishing, and what you know for a timeline for, the spine versus the neighborhoods. I think there's still a lot to be determined.
I just want to have it where we communicate and stay together on this thing as we move forward. It's all unknown to us as to whether we're going to get the money to do this, if it's going to happen. or not.
Right.
that
So
was
we
my
can't
concern.
just sort of say, well, but if there's something definitive
Right.
or closer to, we have a
Right.
better idea, then that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
So I would suggest, I know you're taking the summer off, wish we could, but in the fall, when you have some more information about status of grants and where we're going,
And the
we'd love to
phasing
come
of
back.
it, and how long the phase is.
Yeah, and maybe there's a subcommittee that,
We hope
sort
to have a
of looks-
forum in the fall, before the snow flies. We're wishing for October if we get enough information to get public outreach. We're shooting, I don't know if you were here, I think Phil was here, we're shooting for next town meeting to go for funding.
Okay.
We make an attempt at funding. And
Yeah.
then, of course, we need to, Bob Dale's gonna talk about this, we need to know what goes on with the override to supplant it. I promised them 7:30 to be out of here, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, and October is a big month for us because we have already applied for Mass Works. And also we're working with Senator Markey's office on a federal earmark.
Yeah.
And so we'll see. The latter is 7 million, the first one is 2 million. But we need 7 million for the first
Phase.
1A phase. And so I guess we'll go to town meeting for the state revolving fund if we, for the balance.
Well, it sounds like we'll definitely know before the deadline for cesspools. So the ones that we know about in phase one, we certainly can come to a timeline agreement.
October.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'd love to have an invitation to come back in October,
Sure.
November, whenever. And is this the right board or is the planning board? I don't know who's. I don't really know.
We're a creation of the Board of Selectmen,
Okay.
which ultimately does everything. So
Yeah, water, sewer,
we have no power except
Right.
what we recommend to the Board of Selectmen and these two guys.
I'm glad you want to be here, because the first, Phil was at the last meeting, I was like, well, we're not a water and sewer commission, I don't know how much we can put on the Board of Health, but you're informative.
And also, I believe we're trying to set up something up with the planning board. My vice chair is here, so we also have some things with your stormwater regulations.
Oh, we'd love to talk to you about that.
We're gonna be like Tiverton.
No, we definitely, have some ideas on how to fix things, and that's what we'd like to move forward. I got one last thing, and I could kind of address Jerry and Steve on the new construction. So Title V, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but new construction, Title V So it's all based on bedrooms, 110 gallons per bedroom. So Title V, I guess it's 3 bedrooms, 40,000 square foot lot is adequate size, gives you all the setbacks, so that system removes the nitrogen, and it's adequate. The Title V system is adequate for 40,000 square foot lot, 3 bedrooms. I believe the town of Westport it's 60,000 square feet. So we already had a more stringent regulation than the state did, and this regulation that you guys came up with just blanketed all new construction, and it goes along with what I keep saying about let's try to keep our young people here. That's another $15,000 to the septic on a new system. That
Sure.
it's not a small lot. It's where these systems are needed. They're site specific, and I'd really love to see if we could concentrate on putting them where they belong.
Well, we talked about, you can talk more about the TMDL, which is what's driving that part of the discussion around new construction, because every new house adds more load to our excess load already, so.
But our trunk line, just our immediate trunk line, will lower that dramatically. Just
Yeah.
phase 1 and 2.
Yeah, well, I think the targeted plan gives a lot of data around all the pieces, that have to be part of the solution, and we certainly want to work with you
Steve,
to be part of that solution.
while the Board of Health is here, I would just say that the town really owes the Board of Health an enormous set of thanks. All the citizens who sort of been saved from the DEP regulations, because the arguments that were put forward by the Board of Health, I think were very instrumental in having them delay applications here. And if you look at the towns that wrote letters and all of that, and I was involved in that, the argument put forward by this Board of Health really carried that decision. And also, to address Marty's comment, there is a lot of mismatch in this idea that if you have a 40,000 square foot 4-bedroom, you don't need to do nitrogen limitations. That is set for a whole different set of criteria than taking the load out of the river. And if you look at the new Cape Cod regulations, it isn't about meeting water quality. God help them on the Cape. It's about keep reducing the load. And if you think about that in a big sense, when you take 99% of the load away, isn't there 1% of the load left? And you're going to reduce that load as well? This idea of it's all about reducing the load, and no one answers, they have failed to answer the question about, well, when is enough reduction enough? And we made an argument of, suppose we meet the water quality standards in the river, haven't we reduced the load enough? And they rejected that argument.
Yeah. In the meantime, other communities are dumping into our river, and Boston's making a mess.
And we're not the only ones.
I have another commitment. I
Yeah.
really need to
Thanks.
go. I would like to have a motion to adjourn the Board of Health portion of the meeting. And
Just right behind you.
Second.
all in favor?
There you go.
We're-
Very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Very informative.
Tanya?
Tanya? There you go.
Oh, I got it.
Thumb drive. Okay, let's get back to our agenda now. Update planning and permitting. Kleinfelder is Fernandez and Dela, please. Status of permits.
So good evening. You have in front of you a summary of what's taking place, an update along with some next steps. So as you might recall, the last meeting we talked about a couple of things in what we're referring to as a schedule critical path item that includes sewer pump stations and the interbasin transfer efforts that are underway. With respect to the sewer pump station, we looked at some with the town administrator and Kleinfelder and Bob. We looked at some alternatives. We didn't just put all eggs in one basket with respect to that one property we initially looked at. It wasn't going as as favorable as we had hoped, I think it's safe to say, but we've got another property that is being looked at. That group, that property owner received a concept plan for the proposed pump station on the site. And then there's the other property owner that's gonna require some potential modifications to their system, existing system. There's a meeting actually scheduled tomorrow with one of those groups, and I'm purposely trying to stay vague in terms of naming properties and people, public meeting, but so that meeting's taking place tomorrow at 10 a.m. to go over the plans. So both parties have expressed their openness to either reconfiguring their site or to provide accommodations for a system. And although they have indicated their willingness to work with the town, no detailed discussions or agreements have taken place. But again, I personally think that it's a pretty significant step in the right direction. With respect to the interbasin transfer, on 6/20, Kleinfelder met with representatives from the Mass Department of Conservation and Recreation, and they're weighing the water resources to discuss some unresolved questions presented to the DCR, and the objective is to provide supporting information to obtain the determination of insignificance. So that hasn't changed. The intent behind seeking determination of insignificance, as you know, is to demonstrate that the project's impact on the water resources is minimal and or within acceptable limits, i.e. below thresholds, and therefore does not warrant significant regulatory action or additional measures from the DCR. DCR being, they put forward a list of questions and concerns, they get a detailed response, they come back with more questions or disagree with the responses. So there's been a lot of back and forth with them to try to get them to agree. I think the project team, I want to speak for everybody, but we're not too crazy about, their view in terms of the significance. So we're continuing to push back and see if we can get them to sort of have a come to Jesus moment and realize that this is not.
So that issue is still alive?
That issue is still
Declaration of insignificance.
Right.
Could I ask a question to that? I don't understand what the role of DCR is in this process.
The State Water Resources Commission is housed in DCR. Has nothing to do with
Or State Beach or anything else?
Yeah,
like
no,
that?
they've got another.
Okay, so I didn't know that was a piece of it.
Yes, I think it's just the way they organize it, and it's admittedly it's a technically complicated transfer in that water comes out of Westport, goes into Fall River, comes back into Fall River. Some of it goes in the ground, some of it goes into sewer, and I think. And I don't think the way they think about the issues here makes it easier to resolve the issues. It is difficult to deal with them, and they don't have a practical approach to this at all. And this is something that we've been doing now for 8 or 9 months, and for them, they would like Westport to solve the fact that the state never got an interbasin transfer when they did the water main in Route 6. It looks like other people who are connected never got a transfer. Oh, and Fall River also serves water to Tiverton. That's in another state, by the way, too. And Fall River also sells water to into Freetown, and they would like us to solve all of those interbasin transfers that no one else has ever done.
Have you got a hold of Roderick or Schmidt yet? That's who controls their budget.
We're about to, because it's,
Oh yeah, you'll straighten it out.
it is,
Well, the other irony too, from my perspective, is if you did go through what would be a more extensive process in AIR, legal filing, doing all, you're not changing ultimately sending anything.
The outcomes of
You're
that.
just giving them more information. So the end result is not going to be all of a sudden Fall River's going to develop a ground water sewer discharge system. It's still going to go out to Narragansett Bay, so the system's still going to go to sewer. It's just a question of process for them, and that is the difficult part to accept. And I'll say I added in this particular. It's I won't go through it, but on the last page, to echo what Bob's saying, it's just a list of the stuff that you have to go through just to do a request for determination of insignificance. This is not the full application.
That's why we brought you on board, because we knew there was gonna be some interesting twists.
And we actually do this for a living, and
Right.
it's not understandable.
Yeah.
So I think right now, and Jimmy can correct, I think right now the strategy is to continue to push back and continue to provide supporting documentation and evidence that includes, pre-existing conditions, and trying to get ostensibly credits for as much as we can, and include that application and include it in that application, and to maximize that. To be below this threshold, where it's close to the threshold as we can be, so that we don't have to go through this again.
Talk to the senator and the representative's office, they'll help us.
If we can show that a lot of the older transfers were done before 1984, they're exempt
Right.
from this process. The difficulty is trying to prove that. I know that some of them were, Fall River will tell you that they were, but to get actual documentation that it was done or that there's minutes in the meeting, it's difficult, and that's what we're trying to get now.
Bluegrass emergency. I mean, what about the old continent that we got running up to they have all the water rights to all of that stuff.
Yeah.
How
So,
big was that?
Yeah.
What size pipe was that?
I know. All right, we'll keep plugging away on that, and don't be afraid to get them involved. They help things. They helped us with this DEP thing too.
Yeah, I would encourage it. I mean,
Yep.
sometimes you have to take the belts off a little bit, so just push back a little bit. It's not going to make things worse. I feel confident in that. Okay, with respect to the grants and the funding, so we did do a couple of things. We already talked about the congressional direct spending request that was submitted, and I did go on Senator Warren's website just to take a look at to see that it was actually posted, and indeed the excerpt that you see along with the link that showed that the project was posted and is there. And one thing that I did find interesting, I sort of researched how many she had line item is one of 16. So unlike maybe MassWorks with, we're competing against maybe 50 projects, here is one of 16. And this is not some of it included stuff like the bridges going over towards the Cape, I forget where the second were born. And so some of them were really big ticket items. This one was right in the sort of sweet spot. So that was.
Jim, we haven't had her down yet, I don't think.
Who's that?
Warren. Why don't you invite her for a ride down? We used to bring her for a boat ride once in a while, but not since COVID. Why don't we see if she wants to come down and take a look? Organize it with probably Senator Roderick's too with that. Roderick's had come down with a whole crew and we brought him out there. Because I remember the governor asking where he was when we were on Gooseberry. So he wasn't sure what town he was in, so it was interesting.
And so we're expecting some draft legislation based on their response. The Senator's office anticipated from the subcommittee sometime in late July. So the other application we did submit, which was the full application, which was the MassWorks, the final grant application. We took a little different approach. We did get a lot of information from Maureen, the planning board, and we tried to incorporate potential build-out, because as you know, part of the attractiveness of getting the grant from the state's view is having an imminent project, which is, you can make the argument sometimes it's a little backwards, but in that case, we did include calculations that include FAR, possible build-out of what we could get from vacant land or land that's not fully built out because of sewer septic constraints. The other thing we did is, my experience has been, you can ask for the full amount, but then that puts you in a narrower category in terms of being able to get funding, because they're trying to plug values in and fund as many projects. So instead of asking for the full amount, it might seem counterintuitive, but I do think it improves our chances substantially, is we targeted what they would average, on average, give in terms of grants. That's $1.8 million. So again, I think we all spoke about that before we did that, and we agreed that we wanted to go for something that was more likely to happen than to go for just a shot in the dark.
Roger, or Bob, have we looked at the aspect of supplying the school coming up Arlington Avenue, going around that block as an option? In other words, it's supplying a school, it's another necessity. We didn't plan that loop in yet, did we?
No, we've looked at doing, being able to do that.
All right.
We need to do either the water coming down or the wastewater. We've looked at loops to do that. We've looked at catching the Maycomb School.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
First loop. That's an easier thing to do.
Right, that's not that far. All right, I'm just trying to find angles where we could get more.
On the source side, you got to do the first two legs of the.
Right.
You got to do the first two legs at least to reach down into those neighborhoods.
Yeah, I mean, because if a toilet gets hung up at, a valve gets hung up at Macomb, they run out of water. You gotta
Yep.
wait for the well to reach. So I'm just curious to see if we got that angle going. Okay.
Yeah, Roger, you mentioned that the Mass Works grant has been initially reviewed
Yes.
by DEP.
Well, by the Mass Works
Right.
folks.
Okay, so
Yeah.
did we get any feedback?
We did, and so what I did is I jumped on their website, the application submitted online, and it just, and looking at that, it just gives you a status, initially reviewed, but we won't hear anything from them in terms of a response until the fall on this.
Okay, and Congress isn't clawing back money from those projects that you know of. I was talking to Bob about that. He said, well, congressmen and senators love earmarks for the constituents, so it's probably not clawed back. I don't know, though.
I mean, I don't think at this point they're clawing anything back. I think it's something that actually Bob and I talked about at one point, is speaking with respect to the SRF funding through 2026. And I've looked at some of the presentations, they're flush with money.
It's flush with money
Yeah.
from the COVID funds, right?
Yep.
So that's all out of the infrastructure investment.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, not the first one, the second, yeah.
The intended clawback was to grab the unspent ARPA monies that are in states.
Okay, but not the IRA money.
No.
Okay,
And the first thing the state did was committed all the money that was unspent.
good.
And I think every single state, I don't know much about Mississippi, but I'm sure they spent it all.
Sorry, we got plans for that money. You got any more?
So actually Kleinfeld identified another one for us to look at. I did a little research regarding that. It's the Mass DEP polyfluoroalkyl or PFAS treatment grant. And so the Mass DEP is currently gathering information regarding small or disadvantaged public water supplies. So along Route 6, there's about 9 systems that have detected PFA limits that would meet. So it's 20 parts per trillion, and but even if it's below that, let me back up. So you have some that are above that, but even if it's below that, you still qualify. It's just the ones that are more contaminated, they would view as more of a priority. So they've issued, the EPA's issued $38 million to Massachusetts, and then it's administered through the Mass DEP. And prior grants, round 2, for example, on average let out about $200,000 per project. They haven't established this grant application process yet, but the good news is, based on what I've read, I think they would provide funding retroactively. So if you pay for consulting, for example, and we apply, you said we can demonstrate we paid $200,000 towards consulting fees for something that's going to address that, they'll pay that money back to the town potentially.
But Roger, that sounds like something for after we get the trunk line in. So if we have the trunk line in, we could have a smaller $200,000 project for the school or for these 9.
No,
Go ahead, Bob. You can say what.
no,
that right?
this is seeking. Don't think of it as a sewer project. Think of it as a sewer and water project, because
Yeah.
we're going to build these at the same time.
Yeah.
We're not going to go and try and dig up Route 6 2 times. So, so what we're trying to do is to chase money for either or all of those projects, so that the PFAS is only related to the water.
Water, okay, above 20 parts per million bacteria.
So
That's bacteria.
we're chasing that.
Yeah, okay.
It also funds in kind, so time, just time, any time or anything
Yeah,
that you,
yeah.
so you have to be creative if you're doing that, but I think if you can make the argument that some of that money was spent towards this, as Bob just mentioned, then it makes sense once they open it up to look at that. I mean, $200 is nothing.
Yeah, I mean, if we can replenish our funds, why wouldn't we?
Right, yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay.
And then the last thing, it's not on a critical path in terms of the schedule, but we continue to wait on Mass DOT just to establish something I spoke about at the last meeting, just to establish what they need in terms of the access to the state highway and restoration and stuff. But that's not. I don't think that's.
And your next step thing is what we've got on here is the forum plan to reach out to people when we know a lot. In October, when we get all this information back, so what we can tell the public and start building up for town meeting.
Yeah, and I won't read through it verbatim unless the committee wants to, but basically it's just describing the next steps and the two critical path items that we've got in terms of meetings and what's transpiring. I think tomorrow's an example, and then what needs to take place and sort of the hurdles that need to be overcome with respect to seeking that RDI request determination in significance. But the main intent behind that was just to show you sort of how onerous it can be. And
Well, I'm hoping they don't divert some more for infrastructure funds down the Cape now that they're under the gun and we're not. That's the scary part. Because before we had that hanging over us, look, we need it. Now that we don't, I'm hoping we don't have any lost opportunities. Keep rocking and rolling. Okay, let's keep rocking. Pivoting planning, funding. The ladies and Dale
We just did that, we just did.
We're good on that, right?
Yep.
New business town override. That's Mr. Daly. You're a popular guy.
Given the time and the Board of Health meeting, I don't think, I support the override because if we don't do the override, we won't do any of the stuff that we're working on here. So, we need to be, the town government really needs to reset the tax rate so it has operating money. And that's, and hopefully this board will support it.
Are you looking for a vote or is that a consensus? How do you
I'd like to make a comment here. I also support the override, but I do not support this committee going on record because of one basic reason. Overrides historically get defeated, debt exclusions do not. If we go to town meeting for a state revolving fund loan, that's a debt exclusion, and those succeed. And I don't want us, with a possible override failure, to be connected with our possibly successful debt exclusions. I think to put those two things together is wrong. So I'm gonna say I will not vote in favor of us taking a vote. But if we do take a vote, because I support the override, I will support it.
Bob asked how it was connected.
So that's how I stand on this. But I don't agree with taking a vote.
Does anybody else have an opinion either way if we should vote on it or not? If any motion?
I just don't think it's in our realm of
Right.
responsibility.
It was a gray area, but I give Bob the respect to bring it up.
Yeah, my concern with it just might muddy the waters a little bit.
Right. All right, so there's no motion to that effect at this point? Nobody's making a motion that they support it?
No.
All right, so the consensus is Moriarty, Stevie support it, I support it, we need to get it done, and we'll move forward on that. Okay.
But we're not gonna take a
Steve,
vote.
Nobody's made a motion to that effect, I called it. Okay.
Could I go back to the prior thing? I just have one
Yeah, sorry.
question about this report.
Okay.
It says next step, schedule a meeting with the property owners. Next
That's what we
step.
plan on the October, it's
Okay.
the forum I'm
What
talking
do we
about.
mean by property owners?
We're gonna have one in the north end, White Oak, probably Mac of a school.
Anybody, not necessarily,
Like I don't know if you've been involved in the past, we had a big forum, we filled up the high school with the different
Yeah.
committees.
yeah,
In other words, we'll ask Board of Health to be there. I even got bicycle that's gonna be involved with Route 6. Everybody there have little stations set up. We'll probably each have a spiel and then invite the, but I'm thinking October, before the snow starts flying, when people are catching their breath,
Right.
kids are off to school, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You usually get a better turnout.
I just want to make sure I understood what you meant by
Yeah.
property owner.
Like this time of year, we're lucky it's only 70, because everybody wants to be at their cookout tonight, so.
It wouldn't necessarily be a property owner on the line, it could be people in the back streets that have.
Yeah, everywhere.
That's what I'm saying, we're talking the whole thing.
Yeah, just like when they did Nokochoke, we had a good crowd at Macumber. When we had the Route 6, when we did Route 6, whatever it was, 15 years ago, we had a pretty good turnout discussing that. We did that at White's. Matter of fact, I had Dartmouth there too. So we were all on the same page. And, you know, if maybe we will touch base with Dartmouth, see if they want to come, just so they can.
Steve, I think we have to.
Dartmouth?
I've had some conversations recently with them.
Yeah.
Some of these issues that we're coming up with, so you know a big portion of our watershed goes up into Dartmouth.
Right.
So I actually met with the new director, Tim Barker, this week, and we had a discussion of some pump stations that I'm involved in the project, that we had gave X amount of dollars for design, and Stantec's doing their design. So they've come up and they've, because of their inadequacies with the sewer that they installed, we were buying and giving them some upgrades to accommodate our project. So what has happened now is they're looking at the watershed and the need, and it's kind of with this DEP stuff that came up. So instead of just upgrading them stations, they're putting 2 brand new stations in. So, and it was for that reason. So, and
Well,
I've mentioned to him and Steve Sullivan, who's in water.
Yeah.
So they also have some needs, and they've been fined last year from the DEP for residence time in the pipe. And this is one of the things that the DPW was worrying about, being fined from the DEP when they can't accommodate our project. And they're all ready to come to the table, I believe. So
Yeah, the problem is with Dartmouth, they want a lot more money than Fall River usually. They talk money. That's why we couldn't do anything with Nokochoke, because we started and then they all started bickering, wanted a lot more money and walked
I
away.
think actually they kind of might need us right now. You know?
Yeah.
And the DEP is looking for the interconnect.
Right.
And they got a water. They got a water line that wasn't far from our high school. Would have been a good thing to connect into.
All right, so I mean, maybe Roger will touch base with them too, just to get our feet in there. Maybe we'll have a September
Actually,
meeting.
Roger, I'll get you the contact
Yeah.
information for Steve Sullivan.
Sounds good. I might have Steve still in there too. Okay, sounds good. Title V Advisory Committee meeting.
That we should pass over because it's irrelevant,
Okay.
because we are off the hook with the DEP focusing on Cape Cod
Okay.
for a Kenai system, so.
Right.
Pass over.
So the forum planning is we kind of been touching base with all night. I'd like to get between Columbus and Veterans Day. We don't have to come up with a date tonight. We can do some of that first, via email, but if we need the whole committee as much as possible there, so we can, you know, there's different opinions as we can see tonight and whatnot, and everybody can talk to the crowd, and whoever shows up, and we'll get as much information out as possible. You know, this is a good time, like I say, when the public comes out. We had a lot of good questions last time.
Well, the Economic Development Task Force held 2 of these meetings.
Right.
Back in
Before.
ancient history, and
Yeah.
they were pretty well attended.
Yeah. I mean,
My
there's
thought
public
here is with, you know, October is a critical month for hearing results of our requests for
Right,
grants.
Flood the end.
And so it should probably be closer to Veterans Day than Columbus Day.
That's fine. But after Veterans Day, people start getting into the holiday mode, and we start losing a lot of people.
No, it has to be definitely before Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So probably late, like I think we already mentioned that, in between Halloween and Veterans Day.
Yeah,
That time frame.
early November.
All right, so we'll stay in touch with everybody via email on that. But right now, that's the game plan. Hopefully, we'll have some good news to go forward. Shorelines article, you put that in there about the.
Yes, so everybody who saw, it was last week, it's not this week's, but last week's.
Yeah.
This is something that Steve initiated, he got it going, he talked to Ted Hayes, who's the
Public
primary reporter there, and he interviewed Bob and me. Did he interview? He didn't interview you. But he listened to a lot of the video of our past
You
meetings.
didn't talk to him personally? Oh, he gave me the impression you talked to. Oh, all right. I should have asked you that straight out.
Yeah.
He made it sound like you had conversations with him. I says, okay, well, you got all different opinions.
I make a small, just a kind of small correction on my feeling on the article. I appreciate that we got it.
Yeah, I apologize, I thought.
But also, the planning board's looking, I mean, we're getting ready for public engagement on zoning
Right.
out there, so, I mean, we had a 15-year-old serpent study, we got a new one that kind of rubber stamped it. We've got some wonderful things that have been done at the entrance coming down, hotels, and we got some needs from some housing that's ready for upgrades. I mean, I would like to see that versus a storage facility on the picture.
Yeah, well, I apologize. He kept saying I've got quotes from Manny. He didn't say he was taken out of meetings. I thought you were in the loop too, so
like
I
that
apologize.
eminent public health about the septic regulation.
I got you.
He also had a quote from the late great Bob McCarthy.
Yeah, he did. So
That he got from that first meeting we had
And one last thing,
August.
because I've always been trying to be on record on this, for the responsible redevelopment of 6. Not big is better. I don't know where you get that from, but that's what I'm looking at.
Oh, I didn't even remember
And I
that.
think like the circuit studies, like right on, the stuff that you guys are doing is right on where we need to go.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd like to get up to.
This was,
And we need, so we might want to do a follow-up. We're coming, like the planning board's going to be looking for public engagement on the zoning stuff that we're trying to get ready for next town meeting.
Right.
So maybe people know that that's going
the
on.
planning can be part of it. This was just a touch base. Now you get people, like you said, you get calls, I get calls, oh, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. That's how we get people to go to the forum. They need to have some kind of ears out to what's going on. So, we appreciate the article, even though he could be a little confusing at times. Yeah, every time I talk to him, he says, well, I got quotes from Manny too. I thought he was talking directly to you. Okay, additional new business, anything not anticipated? All right, so many of us have plans for July. Roger, if we have something that we need to touch base in August, let us know. I would say July will be tough for all of us to meet because we pretty much all have a lot of different vacations and hopefully vacations, but projects going on. August, if necessary, definitely back in the swing by September, organizing the October forum. So that's the game plan.
Well, my wife just told me today she booked a cruise at the end of the month, so.
This month?
I know the end of July.
Oh,
So
okay.
1 week's out of the question.
Yeah, July is tough. People get in summer mode, and it's almost like Christmas in July. Everybody just wants to chill. Okay, so nothing else.
Just
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Just repeat the next meeting.
September 6th is a Wednesday at 6:30. It's a Wednesday, correct?
Yep.
Wednesday at 6:30. Okay, and if anybody's plans change, please let me know, because that'll be kind of important for us to find out what people want to get involved with the forum. Maybe we'll ask the Board of Health to pop back in again, since she was so excited to be here. We'll keep her on the cools.
Yep.
All right, anything else to add? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Dale, do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Catino. All in favor? Aye. There you go, unanimous.